Good day, young philosophers. It's me, Sir JP, and it's time for another Philosophy Live. Today, we will move forward to the next period of the medieval era of philosophy, which covers the 15th and 16th centuries. This period is seen as a bridge between medieval and the start of modern philosophy. This period shall be known as the Renaissance period. What is the Renaissance period anyway? The Renaissance is named for the rebirth or revival of classical civilization and learning. In philosophical terms, ladies and gentlemen, the Renaissance represents a movement away from Christianity and medieval scholasticism and towards humanism, with an increasing focus on the temporal and personal over merely seeing this world as a gateway to the Christian afterlife. A new sense of critical inquiry arose that looked back to the ancient Greeks, but also set the stage for the rebirth of modern philosophy in the age of reason. One of the prominent philosophers during that era is Desiderius Erasmus, a Dutch philosopher and theologian of the Renaissance period. He is best known as an early humanist. He is intellectual, father of the Reformation. He was very instrumental in rescuing Christian theology from the pedantries of the scholastics. Having little or no choice at all, Erasmus entered the monastery and became priest. Erasmus escaped the monastery and accepted the post as Latin secretary for the French bishop Henry of Bergen. With the bitter thrust against monastery, he had left behind this maxim: all sound learning is secular learning. He was a very learned classical scholar and was especially interested in the study of ancient languages. Although his Latin and Greek editions of the New Testament earned him enemies among both Catholics and Protestant reformers, his works were hugely popular and influential, both during his life and afterwards. Now, when we talk about contributions, one of his greatest contributions in the world of philosophy is the formalization of the school of thought, which is a philosophy that has an ultimate faith in humankind, which believes that human beings possess the power or potentiality of solving their own problems through reliance primarily upon reason and scientific method, applied with courage and vision. This school of thought is known as humanism. Humanism is a belief that human needs and values are more important than religious beliefs or the needs and desires of humans. An example of humanism is the belief that the person creates their own set of ethics to know what is right and what is wrong. Meanwhile, I'll give you a quick video about humanism.
What should we think about death? One thing we can be sure of is that we will die. Everybody will. Some people do not like the thought of this and don't accept it. They prefer to think that death is not the end of us, but that we might live on, perhaps in another life on earth or in another place where people are rewarded or punished. But wanting something to be true is not the same as it being true. And there is no evidence to support the idea that our minds could survive the end of our bodies. What sense could we make of the things that we value? Love, experience, communication, achievements, the warmth of the sun on our face, if we were disembodied? And if life were eternal, wouldn't it lose much of what gives it shape, structure, meaning, and purpose? Think about reading a good book or eating a delicious cake. These may be great pleasures, But one of the things that makes them pleasures is that they come to an end. A book that went on and on forever, and a cake that you never stopped eating, would both soon lose their appeal. Death is a natural part of life. It makes sense for us to try not to be afraid of this, but instead to come to terms with it. Then we can focus on finding meaning and purpose in the here and now, making the most of the one life we know we have and helping others to do the same, choosing good over evil without the expectation of reward in some other place. When we do die, we will live on, in the work we have done, and in the memories of the other people whose lives we have been part of. Our bodies will break up and become part again of the cycle of nature. The atoms that form us now will go on to form other things, trees and birds, flowers and butterflies.
Going back to Desiderius Erasmus, he said, "The desire to write goes with writing." In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to improve your skill, you have to keep on doing it. At first, you may not be at your best shape when writing, but as long as you practice, you will become better at it. Our next philosopher is one of the most popular philosophers in political philosophy. Now, he is the father of modern political theory, the central figure in the political scene of the Italian Renaissance. In fact, a term was coined from his name. He is Niccolo Machiavelli. In his work, The Prince, which is known as the handbook for politicians on the use of ruthless, self-serving, cunning leadership, the term Machiavellian is a personality trait involving a cold, calculating view toward others and the use of manipulativeness and deceit to achieve one's goal. Machiavellians have limited empathy for others, both on a cognitive and emotional level. The term also means dishonest and deceitful leadership, especially in politics. Machiavelli's time away from, politics gave him the opportunity to read Roman history and to write political treatises, most notably The Prince. The main theme of this short work about monarchical rule and survival is man's capacity for determining his own destiny in opposition to the power of fate, which has been interpreted as the political philosophy that one may resort to any means in order to establish and preserve total authority. In fact, Pope Clement VIII condemned The Prince for its endorsement of rule by deceit and fear. Although he never considered himself a philosopher and often overtly rejected philosophical inquiry as irrelevant, many subsequent political philosophers have been influenced by the ideas of Niccolo Machiavelli. His name has since passed on into common usage to refer to any political move that is deceitful in nature, although this probably represents a more extreme view than what Machiavelli actually took. According to Machiavelli, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. In a cliche, we usually say, "Tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are." Here is a quick video on Niccolo Machiavelli.
We're often appalled by how sly and dishonest many politicians are, but we shouldn't be. In moods like this, we need to remember and read the works of Niccolo Machiavelli, a late 15th century political advisor and political theorist who argued that we shouldn't think that politicians are immoral and simply bad for lying and dissembling and manoeuvring. A good politician, in Machiavelli's remarkable view, isn't one who is friendly and honest and kind. It's someone, however occasionally dark and underhand they might be, who knows how to defend, enrich, and bring honour to the state, which is also an extremely important goal. Being nice may well be a virtue in general, but what citizens most need from their rulers is effectiveness, which may well call upon some darker arts. Once we understand this basic requirement, we stand to be less disappointed and clearer about what we want from our politicians. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469. His father was a lawyer, and so Machiavelli received an extensive formal education and got his first job as a secretary for the city of Florence. But soon after his appointment, Florence exploded politically and expelled the Medici family, who'd ruled it for 60 years, and suffered decades of political instability and turmoil. As a consequence, Machiavelli experienced a series of career reversals. Over just a few decades, he went from being an important diplomat to a semi-successful general to an enemy of the state, tortured and then exiled when the Medici returned to power. Although Machiavelli was rather a failed politician, he can be remembered as a truly great man because of two works he wrote, The Prince and The Discourses. In them, he attends to a central problem of politics then as now, that it's almost impossible to be both a good politician and a good person in the traditional Christian sense. Machiavelli proposed that the overwhelming responsibility of a good prince is to defend the state from external and internal threats to stable governance. This means he must know how to fight, but more importantly, he must know about reputation and the management of those around him. People should neither think he is soft and easy to disobey, nor should they find him so cruel that he disgusts his society. He should seem unapproachably strict, but reasonable. When Machiavelli turned to the question of whether it was better for a prince to be loved or feared, he wrote that while it would theoretically be wonderful for a leader to be both loved and obeyed, a prince should always err on the side of inspiring terror, for this is ultimately what keeps people in check. Machiavelli's Christian contemporaries had suggested that princes should be merciful, peaceful, generous, and tolerant. They thought that being a good politician was, in short, the same as being a good Christian. But Machiavelli argues differently. He asked his readers to dwell on the incompatibility between Christian ethics and good governance, and particularly refer to the case of Girolamo Savonarola. Savonarola was a Dominican friar, a fervent, idealistic Christian who'd briefly come to be the ruler of Florence in 1494. He'd come to power promising to build the city of God on earth in Florence. He'd preached against the excesses and tyranny of the Medici government, and even managed for a few months to lead Florence as a peaceful, democratic, and relatively honest state. However, Savonarola's success could not last, because, in Machiavelli's view, it was based on the weakness that always attends being good in the Christian sense. It was not long before his regime became a threat to the corrupt Pope Alexander, whose henchmen captured and tortured Savonarola, hung him in the centre of Florence, and burnt the body before the eyes of a now vengeful citizenry. This, in Machiavelli's eyes, is what tends to happen to the nice guys in politics. Rather than follow this unfortunate Christian example, Machiavelli suggested that a leader would do well to make judicious use of what he called virtù, virtue. Machiavelli's concept of virtù for politicians involves wisdom, strategy, strength, bravery, and when necessary, ruthlessness. In fact, at one point, Machiavelli uses the deliciously paradoxical phrase criminal virtue to describe the necessary ability of leaders to be cruel in the name of the state, and yet still good as leaders. Machiavelli provided some criteria for what constitutes the right occasion for a bit of criminal virtue. Any violence must be strictly necessary for the security of the state. It must be done swiftly, often at night, counselled Machiavelli, and it shouldn't be repeated too often, lest a reputation for mindless brutality builds up. Machiavelli gave the example of his contemporary, Cesare Borgia, whom he admired as someone who knew how to be tough but not too tough, though we might question the criteria Machiavelli used. When Cesare conquered the city of Cesena, he ordered one of his mercenaries, Ramiro de Orco, to bring order to the region, which Ramiro did through swift and brutal ways. Men were beheaded in front of their wives and children, property was seized, traitors were castrated. Cesare then turned on de Orco himself and had him sliced in half and placed in the public square, just to remind the townspeople who the true boss was. But then, as Machiavelli approvingly noted, that was enough bloodshed. Cesare moved on to cut taxes, imported some cheap grain, built a theatre, and organised a series of beautiful festivals to keep people from dwelling on unfortunate memories. The Catholic Church banned Machiavelli's works for 200 years because of the force with which he had argued that being a good Christian was incompatible with being a good leader. But even for atheists and those of us who are not politicians, Machiavelli's insights are important. He writes that we cannot be good at or for all things, not only because of our limited abilities and resources, but also because of conflicts within moral codes. Some of the fields we choose, if not politics, then perhaps business or family life, may require what we evasively call difficult decisions, by which we really mean ethical trade-offs. We may have to sacrifice neo-Christian visions of kindness for the sake of practical effectiveness. We may have to lie in order to keep a relationship afloat. We may have to ignore the feelings of certain employees to keep a business going. And that, insists Machiavelli, is the price of dealing with the world as it is and not as we feel it should be. The world has continued to love and hate Machiavelli in equal measure for insisting on focusing our attention on the uncomfortable tension between two things we love and always want to have together but perhaps can't: effectiveness and niceness.
I hope you learned something today, though we only discussed Erasmus and Machiavelli. While I am giving you the basics of philosophy, I am pretty sure that you will learn more as you study understanding the self when you reach college. Thank you for joining me today for another day of intellectual nourishment. This is Philosophy Live for Senior High School, my own way to reach senior high school students during this time of pandemic. We end this session with a song and a message of hope for everyone. It's me, Sir JP. God bless everyone.
This pandemic has placed our lives at a halt.
For many months, we have seen how fragile we are as species.
Many people lost their job. Food was scarce. Money was insufficient.
Schools and businesses closed. Malls and parks restricted to human traffic.
Roads were emptied. Many lives were lost.
All these effects and more because of an unseen enemy, the coronavirus.
Yet after many months of isolation, here we are as a generation.
We are here as one solid community.
As a potent force, arming ourselves with courage and prayer.
It's not the end. Together, move forward.
We move forward to a future where everything is uncertain.
Yet, we put our God in the center,
praying that everything will come together.
After this pandemic, life will never be the same.
We become stronger and better people,
ready to face any challenge which will come our way.
Signore, mi rendi uno strumento della vostra pace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace.
The world is suffering from a lot lately. Racial, religious, and gender discrimination.
Extreme hunger and poor access to clean water.
Biodiversity loss, climate change, wildlife abuse, unemployment, armed conflict, social injustice.
Life is unfair, yet we are still blessed to be here.
Dove c'è verità, perdono. Dove c'è dubbio, fede, dove c'è disperazione, sperare tenerezza, illuminarsi dove c'è la tristezza, gioia.
No typhoon nor calamity can bring us down.
No virus can weaken us or break our core.
No poverty can hinder us from reaching our dreams.
No detractors can pull us down.
Because for us, Filipinos,
whose God is at the center of our lives,
We will get through this together.
we think positive amidst the chaos.
We do our best, even when it is difficult.
We believe that we conquer the world
by conquering ourselves.
We are Filipinos.
We are destined to rise amidst adversities.
For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born again. It is in dying that we are born again. It is in dying that we are born again to eternal life.
With our hope and dreams intact,
we will never falter.
We will never stumble.
We will never surrender.
Il Signore, make me an instrument